Welcome to another episode of CNMI Weekly, where we recap the biggest headlines from the past week and share what you need to know heading into the weekend. In our first story, the Saipan Chamber of Commerce says the CNMI's economy is in crisis mode. We have a report from their second annual economic forum. The Saipan Chamber of Commerce held its second annual economic forum. It began with a stark reminder.
We are in crisis mode. This is not a surprise to anybody.
Saipan Chamber of Commerce Vice President Joshua Wise described the circumstances as the storm before the calm. He announced Operation 500,000, an effort to reach 500,000 arrivals for the industry to break even.
Even if every single plane operated at a 100% capacity, which we all know is unlikely, the standard that we use is an 80% metric, which we can basically will allow us to achieve almost 320,000 arrivals, which we saw earlier. That's not even half of what we had in 2017 at 653,000.
What they hope for is for the CNMI to receive unlimited flights from China and enhance the Visitors Authority's budget, among other efforts. The gloomy picture got darker with each presentation.
Hyatt is just the tip of the iceberg. With the summer, this will determine closures. Whether or not they're temporary or permanent are the only questions.
Secretary of Finance Tracy Narita gave the government's financial outlook.
Our cumulative shortfall there is 4.1. We are monitoring this shortfall as we enter into Q3, and should we be reasonably certain that we might not meet the overall forecast, we will be preparing a revised budget.
Guam Chamber of Commerce Chair Ernie Galito shared some of the efforts on Guam.
One of the things that we're looking at in Guam is that we want to transition from a GRT tax to a sales tax. And the reason why we want to do that is because a sales tax is more visible to the consumer.
He also had this message to share amid the economic woes.
And conferences presents a lot of ideas. Conferences don't usually produce solutions. Hard work does.
And in our next story, Senator Selena Babauta holds a press conference responding to her removal as chair from a Senate committee. Saipan Senator Selena Babauta, a Democrat, held a press conference after Senate President Edith De Leon Guerrero, who recently left the party, removed Babauta as chair of the Judiciary, Government, and Law Committee. Babauta was off island when the May 7th memo was issued. She was joining the Guam Visitors Bureau on their travel mission to Japan.
I was actually in the air when I was notified that I was removed from the JGL. And that has been a long-standing dysfunctional leadership we've had in the Senate for the last 16 months. We have had no leadership meetings, not a single one. We don't know, we are not privy as to when the next Senate session will be. The Senate President has basically usurped the powers of the floor leader.
The senator, who has endorsed the Senate President's opponent in the upcoming election, also said that she did reach out to senators in the minority from Tinian to include them in the committee. She also responded to the Senate President's assertion that the last committee meeting was held in September and that there are at least 30 Senate bills and 28 House bills pending in JGL.
As for bills sitting in committee, just because it's in committee doesn't mean it's not being worked on.
KUAM asked the senator for her message to the public amid the conflict. And Senator, where does this leave the public? Because it's a critical time, the economy is tanking, and the Senate can't seem to get along. So what is your message to the public? And how will we get out of the economic crisis if we can't talk to each other?
I've tried. I've introduced a captive insurance bill, which now is tabled, according to yesterday's Senate. They didn't want to act on it, or they didn't act on it. That would create a new industry for the CNMI. That's one of the things. It's unfortunate that they have to bring people down in order to raise themselves up. Talk is cheap. Let's do the work.
And in our next story, Delegate Gregorio Sablan questions the Interior about an energy program meant for the territories. NMI Delegate Gregorio Sablan pressed Assistant Secretary for Insular and International Affairs Carmen Cantor about the Energizing Insular Communities program.
I'm not satisfied with the way your office administers this program. Insular Affairs Director John Brewer testified here a few weeks ago that the purpose of the energizing insular communities is to help, underscore help, the insular areas develop energy strategies.
Sablan said the goal is to reduce reliance on expensive foreign oil and increase domestic energy production. He sponsored the now public law that outlines that responsibility.
If OIA provided the plans and the technical and financial expertise as Public Law 113-235 directs, will you, Madam Secretary, will you commit to follow the law?
Yes, we commit to following the law, always.
Sablan appeared frustrated by the response.
Jesus, well, you haven't been for several years now. Madam Secretary, I'm asking you to please, this is really important. You know, people in my district are paying close to 50 cents an hour for 1 kilowatt of electricity. It's in the 40 cents range. Before you give out money, the plan was to build a plan for energy in the insular areas. You haven't done that. You've given out grants. I mean, you know, Santa Claus does that on Christmas. You haven't done that. That just, so will you follow the law? Because it's on record. The law as written by Donna Christensen and I. Will your office follow the law? Please.
Delegate, we follow the law.
Don't go away. We'll have more CNMI Weekly right after this. Welcome back to another episode of CNMI Weekly. In our next report, we hear from the National Guard and recruits from the Northern Marianas. The goal is to one day establish our own National Guard. Sergeant Juan Camacho is aggressively recruiting NMI residents to join the Guam National Guard. They recently announced that Guam Guard recruits jumped from 3 to 75 in 2 years.
We are actively recruiting. There's a lot of interest in the community here in the CNMI.
Recent natural disasters and the pandemic have renewed talks about the need for the National Guard, which can be activated by the governor or U.S. president. We spoke with recent recruits who shared why they enlisted. Private First Class Rael Quezon is the first to enlist from Saipan in 2022 after 10 years. He's a graphic designer.
Better my life, I guess, just to add something new, to challenge myself. From working an office job, 9 to 5, to something that no one could ever know.
Private First Class Ana Kaniko is the first female to enlist from Saipan amid the renewed effort. She works for Delta Management Corporation.
Being with my civilian job for 10 years, I wanted to experience something different, something out of this island, and to be in uniform, especially because a girl or a woman or female in uniform, it says a lot.
Private First Class Randolph Ferrer enlisted while working for the Ports Police.
It was always something that I wanted to do when I was younger, but I just never really had the chance to fulfill that dream.
Those dreams are now a reality as the CNMI hopes to establish its own unit, which requires congressional action.
The finish line, right, would probably to one day have a CNMI National Guard.
And in our next report, law enforcement from across the CNMI gather at the Department of Public Safety for National Peace Officers Memorial Ceremony.
Our fallen heroes dedicate their lives to a cause greater than themselves. These heroes left behind loved ones, spouse, children, parents, and friends.
Law enforcement and their families across Saipan gathered at the Department of Public Safety Wednesday, joining the nation in holding a Peace Officers Memorial Ceremony.
We pledge to remember their sacrifice. We pledge to stand strong in face of adversary, to uphold the law with integrity, and serve with the same dedication and courage as they did.
CNMI officials presented a special wreath, followed by family and law enforcement representatives presenting memorial candles in honor of their loved ones.
Commissioner, and all law enforcement officers and DPS administrative staff, it is your responsibility for your courageous and in keeping our island safe and peaceful.
Thomas Manglona, KUAM News, Saipan. And in our last report, there's some hopeful news for the Guam CHEC. Here's the latest installment of our Flight of the CHEC series. It was last July when KUAM traveled to the Sedgwick County Zoo in Wichita, Kansas to capture the CHEC Recovery Program's international effort to return the Guam kingfisher into the wild. Almost a year later, the process begins again, with a female chick hatching at the Kansas Zoo.
We have a chance, and none of us should give up, as this team of partnerships have not given up on the Guam CHEC.
The first chick hatched from an egg transported from Cincinnati Zoo in Ohio. There are 9 zoos across the U.S. taking part in the breeding program for the hopeful release on Palmyra Atoll this year.
Palmyra is the solution to CHEC's survival, and it provides us the next steps towards getting our own birds returned to Guam one day. We're very hopeful.
But first, they'll make their journey from Kansas to Palmyra, taken care of by a team of specialist bird keepers working around the clock to hand-raise up to 9 chicks. The last wild sighting of the CHEC was in 1988. There are only 141 Guam CHEC left in the world, all under human care. There are just 45 breeding females left.
We're working with live animals, so anything can happen. If there's a delay or something that they have to deal with, the teams are so versed at doing so, we'll have to do a bit of wait and see at times. There's been suitability studies over the years, captive breeding efforts, tons of meetings and teams on the ground, literally moving precious cargo across more than 4,000 miles to their final destination. It's a huge deal. This release has been anticipated for many, many years.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of CNMI Weekly. I'm your host, Thomas Manglona, and we'll see you right here, same time, same place, next week.